Hello, crafty friends! It's Alicia here with a project for Tailored Expressions. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a rock and easel card with a galaxy-inspired background. Featured on today's card is the Feel the Beat die set and Mix Master background stamp. I will also be using the Best Mix Ever stamp and coordinating die set, as well as Circle Stacklets dies. For papers, I am using rock candy and sugar cube cardstock, along with TE vellum, and for some added sparkle, hot pink glitter cardstock. For ink blending and some stamping, I will be using Concord grape, dragon fruit, rock candy, and Oreo, along with the coordinating blender brushes. Some handy tools I'll be using are the Score Buddy Mini, exclusive TE Teal Misty, and their Just Press tool, and I'll be stamping on some vellum with StazOn Jet Black ink. For some added fun, I will be splattering with Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White and embellishing with the Bits and Pieces Purple Glitter Drip Drops. And I'll be using a variety of adhesives to hold everything together. Let's get crafty! I'm going to get started by ink blending my background onto a piece of sugar cube that is 4 by 4 3/4. We will be trimming this down just a little bit later. For the background, I want to create a galaxy-inspired look, so I'm going to use the 3 colorful inks and do kind of splotches or circles just randomly on the card front. Now, while I do say this is random, I did try to keep each of the colors in a triangle shape from each other, and you'll notice that I didn't really fill in every square inch of this piece of cardstock. You can see some white peeking through, and I'll tell you here in just a minute how to remedy that. When you're doing a background like this, you don't really have to go for perfect ink blending. It might look a little splotchy at first. Don't forget these inks do have a leveling agent, and because of the way this technique is, it is very forgiving. Once you have your original colors in, now you'll want to go in with your black ink. For me, I'm using Oreo, and fill in any of the open areas. So now you will cover up every square inch of that piece of sugar cube. Now, once I went through and added my black, I did go back in with some of my blender brushes and add a little bit more color to some of those areas and blended out the black a bit. Just keep blending, keep adding color until you like the way it looks. Again, this will even out over time. To add some more interest to the background and make it more of a music theme, I brought in the Mix Master background rubber stamp, and I am going to stamp it onto the piece we just ink blended with Oreo ink. I did go ahead to make sure I had a nice solid black. I inked this up and stamped it twice. Let us know in that comment section below if you have ever made a galaxy background for a card. Once the music notes were stamped, I wanted to add some stars to my galaxy, and to do this, I'll be doing some splattering. I brought in a box to protect my work surface, and I'm going to use Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White to do the splattering. I placed a little on my mini glass block, added a drop of water, which you could always add more or less of either of these, and then I mixed it up with the brush and started the splattering. Now for this, you can try different techniques. Tap it on your finger, tap it with your finger, tap it on the box. You could flick at the bristles itself. Just keep splattering until you like the coverage and how many quote-unquote stars you have. While that dries, I'm going to work on some other elements of the card. So I brought in a piece of hot pink glitter cardstock, and I'm going to cut it to 4 inches wide and then 2 pieces that are 2.5 inches tall. For the die cutting, I will be cutting 2 of the full head sets from Concord Grape, the medium-sized pieces from Rock Candy, and then the remaining pieces from the centers of those glitter cardstocks I just cut. Here's a look at all of those pieces, and don't forget to keep the glitter cardstock because we will be using that later. I'm going to start by layering the two headsets together. Now the reason I cut two of these was just because they will be kind of popped up off the card, so this just gives a little more stability. I layered the rest of the pieces together to complete the headphones. I did use liquid glue so I would have some wiggle time to get everything aligned nicely. And you'll want to make sure that if you're using glitter cardstock like I am, that you do add a little extra glue to the back of anything that gets adhered on top of this. That's just to make sure that it sticks nicely. Between each of the layers, I did set these under some clear blocks to dry. The musical galaxy background was all dry, so it's time to cut it down just a little bit, and I'm going to take 1/8 of an inch off each edge for a finished size of this piece that is 3 3/4 by 4 1/2. Once that is cut down, we're now going to cut it in half for the card front to two pieces that are 3 3/4 by 2 1/4 inches. Those two pieces will then get added to their glitter cardstock mat. Again, I did use plenty of adhesive on the back. It gives you just a nice even pink glittery border, and then the pieces that we cut out of the middle you can't see, so it's a great way to make the most of your cardstock. To make the easel card base, I am using the mini Score Buddy, and I have a piece of rock candy cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 11. I'm going to score it at 5 1/2 and 2 3/4. When I score, I usually do 2 to 3 light scores instead of trying to go in real heavy the first time, just to avoid getting out of the tracks or maybe even breaking my cardstock. While I think a scoring tool is a must-have, if you don't yet have one, you can take your piece of cardstock, fold it in half, and then fold the front portion in half on itself, and that will get you the same look. I got each of the matted stenciled pieces added to the card front. For this, I'm just using tape runner to keep everything nice and flat so far. And when I put those on the card front, I did my best to center them in each of the halves with a nice even border. Now there will be a little bit extra room between the top and bottom when the card is flat, but you'll see later when you go to turn it into an easel, the border is even all the way around on that bottom section when it's showing. At this point, I was going to get my headphones adhered, but I realized that they didn't stand out enough from the background. So using some of the TE vellum and the circle stacklets, I cut a circle using the second from largest die in the set. It fit the headphones perfectly, and you'll see here that you can still see the galaxy background, but then the headphones stand out from it just to make them a little more obvious. I got that added to the vellum with some liquid glue. Again, that gives me just some wiggle time to get everything nice and centered. Once that piece was all dry, it was time to get it put on the card front. For this, you'll want to figure out exactly where you want it to go and only put adhesive where it will be adhered to the bottom half of the card front. If you adhere it to the entire card front, your card won't fold into an easel. For the headphones, it was pretty much those little earmuff parts at the bottom. While that dries, I'm going to work on the main part of the sentiment, and for that, it's the Happy B-Day stamp from Best Mix Ever, and I stamped that onto a scrap of sugar cube cardstock with rock candy ink. Now for the second portion of the sentiment, I am choosing You're Not Old, You're Retro. For this, I want to put it right on the card front, and I want it up on the vellum between the headphones. So this might have been something I wanted to do earlier before the card was put together, but the great thing about the MISTI is if I need to stamp twice, it's already set up. So I figured out where I wanted the other part of the sentiment to go, and because you can't see through these stamps and I want to make sure it's straight across, I pulled out a piece of acetate that I always keep in my MISTI, and I'm going to do a little test stamp on that. You can see right through this to see if you need to make any adjustments. I had to make a slight one and I tested it again, but once that was done, all I had to do then was remove the acetate, re-ink the stamp up, and get it stamped onto the vellum. And again, for this, I'm using Stays On since vellum is a non-porous surface. While I was off camera cutting out the Happy Bee Day, I did end up cutting 3 more copies from plain sugar cube. Sometimes when you make easel cards, you'll put the sentiment on the inside on foam tape to help the easel stand up, but because portions of this sentiment were pretty skinny, I decided to just layer it together to get a nice thick stack. I used liquid glue and I started from the bottom layer going to the top, doing my best to make sure everything was nice and squared up before moving on. Once that was all dry, it was time to get this put on the inside of the card. And you'll see here that when you put the card in an easel, that stops the card from closing. I kind of figured out where I wanted to go, what angle I wanted the top at, and then I added the Happy Bee Day to the inside of the card with some liquid glue. While that was drying, I cut a piece of sugar cube cardstock off camera to about 4 inches by 3 inches. And that's going to go on the top of the inside of the card so the personal message will be easier to read. Now, when you do a card like this, you might have to adjust the size depending on how much room you have above your inside sentiment. I wanted to add a little more sparkle to finish the card off, so I brought in purple glitter drip drops and added 5 to the vellum on the front of the card. And here are some close-up looks at the finished piece. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's video. If you enjoyed the process, a thumbs up is appreciated. And if you're not already a subscriber, we do hope you'll click on the button below so you're the first to know about our latest videos. To find out more about the products I used today, you can check out the links in the description box below or visit the Tailored Expressions online store at tailoredexpressions.com.